Hello and welcome. Today's presentation is on the barriers and enablers of hearing aid wireless technology adoption. My name is Troy Rankin and I work for ZPower, which is located in Camarillo, California. And I'd like to thank Dr. Ross Duber and Dr. Barry Freeman for their contributions to this presentation that we're making here today. First off, before we get into the details of the presentation, it's worth mentioning what or who is ZPower. And we have a few humorous examples of a new sports drink, an automatic transmission system from BMW, a special formula for calculating acoustic impedance, or finally ZPower is what you need to turn on Z-Lite. It's of course none of these, but ZPower is a micro battery manufacturer based in Southern California who is developing rechargeable button cells specifically for the hearing aid market with an objective to transition the market from disposable batteries to rechargeable batteries. And as we all know, batteries are very important, and for hearing aids especially, the battery dominates really the size of the device. And so as you can see in the cartoon here, although it may be the smallest, slimmest watch or hearing aid in the world, the only downside is the battery. And oftentimes that becomes the compromise. The battery itself either is very large, making the device larger, or if you shrink the battery down too small, then you compromise the life and the runtime of the device, which may be shorter than what the end user would prefer. Of course, the alternative to this is something like this example of this gentleman here, which of course is ridiculous, so we're stuck with the fact that we do need batteries to operate the hearing aids, and so we're looking for to develop better solutions and more convenient solutions for the hearing aid market. So specifically what we're going to be talking about today is the wireless features, wireless accessories for the hearing aid market. And this is an overview of the topics that we'll cover. First off, we'll cover the wireless features and functions. We'll cover a survey that ZPower conducted regarding wireless usage. Some recent advances in wireless accessories since that survey was conducted in 2013. And then lastly, looking ahead to the future and what things might be down the road. So we'll go ahead and start off with the features and functions as just a review to cover exactly what things we're covering in the survey that we conducted last year. So first of all, we'll cover bilateral commands, remote controls, audio TV streaming, Bluetooth phone, and remote microphone. We are not covering the wireless bilateral transfer of audio data for the purposes of binaural beamforming or other directional applications. And the reason for that is it's at this point it's only used by a few manufacturers. So we're really focused on the functions and accessories that are offered by nearly all of the manufacturers and would be common for the different brands. So as we look at bilateral commands, probably the most straightforward and easiest to understand of the different wireless functions. This is where the hearing aids exchange codes in order to synchronize the volume programs, other features that are in the hearing aid. It's integral. It comes already configured this way, so there's not an additional accessory or device that needs to be purchased. And there is some element of configuration so that one hearing aid can control programs, the other can control volume. Again, something that's integrated to the hearing aid and does not require any special accessory by the user themselves. If we look at remote controls next, again, pretty simple, basically looking to wirelessly change the volume or the programs in the hearing aid. And what we see is a variety of some devices here that the different manufacturers offer. They can range from something fairly simple with push buttons to higher end devices that may have touch screens and have a more flexible user interface to enable more advanced functions. On to audio TV streaming. And again, this is where the audio from an entertainment system, which could be a TV, could be an audio receiver, is wirelessly transmitted from that device to the hearing aids. and there are typically cables that would connect this audio TV streaming device to the TV or receiver that it's being connected to. And again, as we look at some different devices, you'll see that they really fall into two different categories. There are those that we'll call a lanyard or worn around the neck, and then there are the radio frequency designs, which you may be able to put in your pocket and possibly have more freedom of movement. What we see in general is that for these devices, typically it's about 30 feet maximum distance between the streaming device and the hearing aids, and the streaming device is typically located very close or near to the television or audio receiver. Next, we have the Bluetooth phone, and again, this is where we have communication directly from the hearing aid and the mobile phone. The audio from the phone streams directly into the hearing aid, similar to a Bluetooth headset. And then for the microphone to pick up the speaker's voice, that may be located in a relay device, which may be worn around the neck. Or in one example, one manufacturer actually uses the microphones in the hearing aid to pick up the voice and transmit that back to the other caller. Again, there's two different groups or categories that these Bluetooth phone accessories fall into. There are the near field magnetic induction, and again, I'll go into a little bit more detail in this technology a little bit later on, but fundamentally they're worn around the neck and they have a shorter transmission distance. And this would compare to the radio frequency devices where you have more freedom of where you locate the device. It can be in a pocket, it can be clipped onto your clothing. And the reason for that is you have longer transmission distances possible. And so those are the two groups that the Bluetooth phone options fall into. Next up would be the remote microphone. And again, this is where an external microphone located on a speaker or near a speaker will be sending sound back to the hearing aids for the user to hear. And again, there are two groups here as well. You have a relay connection, where there isn't, the hearing aids would receive the audio through a separate device. So the microphone will go to a relay device, which then will connect to the hearing aids. Or you have a direct connection where the hearing aids would receive the audio directly from the microphone. And again, it just depends on the different manufacturers and how they choose to implement this design. And one thing you may have noticed as we've run through these different wireless accessories, many of these have appeared in multiple categories. So some of the devices offered by the manufacturers are multifunctional, while other manufacturers have taken an approach to have a more singular function, a dedicated function for the different devices. And a lot of this just depends on the manufacturer's design preference. The other thing I'll add here is that these are all examples of devices that were available at the time of the survey that we conducted in 2013, and I'll go into a little bit more detail on where and who were part of that survey here in the next section. So as we get into the ZPower survey on wireless usage, why did we do this? At the time, what we knew was that over 70% of hearing aids sold had a wireless capability, but a fairly small percentage actually were sold with wireless accessories. And that 70% number in 2013 has now approached 80% as of the most recent market data. And so that the market continues to provide more wirelessly enabled hearing aids, but the wireless accessory usage still is something that's is fairly small regarded in comparison to the hearing aids being sold themselves. Basically, we gave this the survey to hearing instrument specialists and audiologists. We had over 100 respondents, and this was all done at 3 different conferences: the IHS conference that was in Washington, D.C., the ADA conference that was in Bonita Springs, Florida, and the California Academy of Audiology conference that was in Sacramento in 2013. And what we focused on really was the experience that the specialists and the audiologists had with wireless accessories. We wanted to know, in particular, information that dealt with which accessories were most popular and what decisions or what information would impact the dispenser's decision to prescribe certain wireless accessories. So as we look at the data here in terms of the popularity of wireless accessories, we can see that the bilateral commands were preferred or popular by far over the other options at 80%. And again, these are respondents who provide wireless features for at least 60% of their patients. So we focused on those who were most likely to offer the wireless features to their patients. Remote control was second, followed by Bluetooth, audio TV streaming, and remote microphone was the least popular of the different wireless features to be prescribed. The other question that we asked was, what limits the use of wireless features? And we got several different categories of answers. And what we found was that the number one reason why wireless accessories may not be offered along with a hearing aid was that they're too complicated for that particular patient. Tied for second was higher battery drain and limited benefit, followed by return visits and the total time dedicated to fitting the wireless device and explanation of how it works. So what we're going to focus on, basically the top three areas or responses that we got for what limits the use of wireless features. And we'll start out with the too complicated, explore that in a little bit more detail, then work on to the limited benefit, and finally to the higher battery drain to understand exactly what we learned from this particular survey. So as we look at the too complicated response, we asked a little bit one level deeper question: how easy are wireless accessories to set up? And we rated the different wireless accessories that we talked about, and we compared. And what we saw were that the bilateral commands were rated as the easiest to set up. And that's good because they are basically already set up or enabled in the hearing aids themselves. So this should be the easiest wireless feature to enable. This was followed by the remote control, the remote microphone, the Bluetooth phone, and then in the category of least easy to set up was the audio TV streaming. And so what we're going to focus on are basically the two most difficult items, and maybe dig a little bit deeper into why these may have been rated as the most difficult to set up. So first off, we'll look at the audio TV streaming. And when you look at the different devices, again, you're required to have a cable connection between the television or receiver and the wireless streaming device. And so the first question that the user has in setting this up is, do I connect this device to the television, to my satellite receiver, to a cable box? What is it? Where is it that I'm trying to get the audio from to my hearing aids? The other thing that's also not uncommon is that the speakers in the television will often be muted when the audio out is connected. So while the hearing aid wearer may enjoy a full television experience, other people in the room won't, and so that becomes a problem. Other issues that are required are that not all televisions have the same connections. So sometimes there are converters or adapters required to enable the wireless streaming device to work. And as we all know, our televisions tend to be in a dark corner that's difficult to access. And so to be able to get to these areas to connect the cables to, or even to find out what connections are available, is very inconvenient and difficult. And so as we look at this, this really points to the fact that the audio TV streaming is by far the most challenging of the wireless accessories to use. And I think a big part of that is because the televisions are not controlled by the hearing aid manufacturers. Whereas when you look at a remote control or a remote microphone, the manufacturer of the hearing aids has control of each of the devices and can better establish the way those devices are connected. And televisions, unfortunately, don't have a standard yet for streaming audio to hearing aids. Next, we look at Bluetooth phone, the second to last item on easy to set up. And usually what people complain about the most on Bluetooth is the pairing process. So the initial setup can be relatively complicated. You may have some different buttons that you need to push to start the whole pairing process that you may have to dig into the manual to find. Then you do have to find in your individual smartphone the Bluetooth settings area to get that configured. Enter a pairing code, and then you're connected. Now the challenge is that sometimes these devices do become disconnected and you have to go through and reestablish the Bluetooth connection, and in some cases have to go through and actually repair the devices and go through this whole process again, and so that can become a relatively complicated process. And when you consider that all of these different smartphones have a little bit different setup screen and software in them, the audiologist or dispenser becomes a bit challenged when it comes to uh, being able to understand and know all of these different models of phones and be able to set up the Bluetooth for each of those different models. So at the end of the day, we have some complicated wireless accessories, and the patient gets affected because if they have expected that the hearing aid and wireless accessory are going to be an important component of their hearing experience, they may decide to return the accessory as well as the hearing aids afterwards, and it may affect their total impression or perception of how the hearing aids themselves work. And of course, that could lead to them speaking to others and missed referrals. So a number of negative events that could happen from that. As far as the dispenser or the audiologist is concerned, the setup and configuration of the device does take time. That's additional time that could be spent doing other activities, fitting other patients with hearing aids, for example. It forces the hearing professional to be familiar with many different consumer devices, and they're always coming out with new ones, and being up to speed on how to configure and set up all of the wireless functions and features. And of course, there could be more follow-up questions. So any issues that would be related to this would not be related to how well the patient's hearing, but how well they're connected to their different devices that they're trying to get wireless streaming working. So the next of the three areas that we're going to focus on are the limited benefit. And this happened to be the second most common response to what limits the use of wireless features. And so there is a perception that that for some patients that there may be a limited benefit to these wireless accessories, and so we'll explore that to understand that better. So as we look at which wireless features are most beneficial, and inherently what this means is which ones provide the most benefit. The Bluetooth phone actually was by far the top of the list at 81%. That was followed by the bilateral commands, audio TV streaming, remote microphone, and in last place was the remote control. It was judged to be the least beneficial of these five accessories. So what was interesting was to compare what's popular with the dispensers or audiologists and compare that to the patient benefit, and what we're seeing is a little bit of a mismatch. These two survey questions did not sync up exactly as we would expect. And what we noticed first of all was that the remote control, while that was the second most popular accessory to be with the hearing professional, it actually, in the judgment of the hearing professionals, offered the least benefit. And perhaps one reason why we could explain that would be that the remote controls are popular because they're simple to explain, relatively straightforward to set up, and there's not a lot of confusion that would go with that. However, when you look at the benefit, maybe that's limited a bit because you have an extra device to carry around that you could basically implement most of those functions through the connections on the hearing aid itself. The other area that we looked at was the Bluetooth phone. It stood out as having the greatest patient benefit, but was in the middle of the pack when it came to the popularity with dispensers. And I think one thing that might jump out is, of course, if the patient does not have a Bluetooth phone, then certainly that, while it may be beneficial, it won't be relevant for that particular situation. And then lastly, we looked at too complicated to use. We looked at both Bluetooth phone and audio TV streaming, which were in the upper group and had fairly high patient benefit numbers, but popularity-wise were towards the bottom with the hearing professionals. And again, I think this goes back to what we explored earlier with the too complicated to use. These two devices do have, in the judgment of the respondents of the survey, do have the most complicated setup. So as we look into the patient benefit and the Bluetooth phone, we want to look at why is that benefit so high? What is it about Bluetooth phone that seems to be judged as such a benefit to the wearer? And I think what we're seeing here is that with Bluetooth headsets, there's a difficulty in using that with hearing aids. There's some compatibility issues, and in many states, if you're driving, you do need hands-free capability. So to have that connection directly with the hearing aid itself is a tremendous benefit. And especially as we see the baby boomers age and their familiarity and usage with Bluetooth devices, there is an expectation that this is something that would be available with the hearing aid itself. And lastly, one of the other benefits that you do get out of bringing these directly into the hearing aid is that you can turn off the external microphone during the call and actually lead to a better opportunity to hear the sound quality of the call. Instead of having to cup your hand over one ear, the hearing aid actually takes care of that for you. The other area as we looked and compared the popularity versus the benefit responses was that the remote microphone had one of the largest gaps. It was ranked at the very low in the popularity side, but was judged to have a fairly high benefit, and so we wanted to explore exactly why that may have been the case. And so what we looked at was that the remote microphone was rated as very easy to use, and again I think that's because the manufacturer does have control over the design of the remote microphone and the hearing aid, so that connectivity and setup can be a much better and more reliable connection. What we don't know is, are the remote microphones something that are recommended or promoted? And what we don't know is, are patients willing to use this technology? The remote microphone does require the speaker to either hold the remote microphone like they're being interviewed on television, or clip it onto their clothing, and so does that create some barriers to usage as well. But as we looked into what the benefits for the remote microphone look like, they were substantial. And the main reason that we look at is really the signal-to-noise ratio, which is where most patients seem to react. And the background noise, because it's a problem for many patients and is what drives them into the hearing professional to begin with, as we look at signal-to-noise ratio, noise is one element of that as we look at the remote microphone. The other is distance. So the intelligibility does diminish with distance, the speaker's distance from the hearing aid wearer. And lastly, the room reverberation also does affect the feedback cancellation feature in the hearing aid. So if we can do some things to improve the signal-to-noise ratio, will help with each of these particular items to help eliminate the background noise, improve intelligibility, and have better performance from the feedback cancellation features. When we look at the remote microphone, it's designed to increase that signal-to-noise ratio, which helps with all three of those. And when the manufacturers have done some testing to evaluate how well the remote microphones compare to the directional microphones, they do see a substantial difference. So when you see in this comparison, down is good. So the signal-to-noise ratio comparison between the adaptive directional microphone versus two different forms of remote microphone show that the signal-to-noise ratio is substantially improved with the use of the remote microphone, and can help in many different settings where the hearing aid would struggle to be able to give the best performance possible. All right, and the last of the three that we'll focus on, of the three that limit the use of wireless features, is higher battery drain. And so to do that, we really need to dig into a little bit about the different forms of the wireless streaming devices. And the first group that we have here are really the near field magnetic induction. And so this is where the lanyard acts like an inductive loop. The device, that's the streaming device, does need to be relatively close to the hearing aids because it is using that inductive loop function. The orientation is important. If that orientation is altered, it can affect the connectivity. But the big benefit of this is there's a minimal increase in the hearing aid current drain, and so that's really what the big benefit is. Comparatively speaking, on the far field radio frequency, again, we're using a radio communication which allows a longer distance of communication, You have more freedom of where you can locate the device. It can be in your pocket, it can be in some discrete location. The trade-off is that you do have a noticeable increase in the current drain, and that means the batteries will last a shorter time period. And so those are the two trade-offs that we see between these systems. So Widex actually published a study that was in Audiology Online in 2013, comparing the different models or brands of hearing aids and their everyday use versus their streaming use. And so in this chart, what it basically looks at is the current drain of the hearing aid while it's being used in just normal settings versus when it's streaming audio. And what you can see is that for the brands where the two current drains are very similar, that's indicative of that near field magnetic design. And the ones where there's a fairly large gap between the two current drains is indicative of the radio communication, the radio frequency communication, which is a far field communication device. Now again, the current drains may not mean a lot to the hearing professional directly, but what it really relates to is what does the life of the battery look like when you compare this? And so when you look at that same data that Widex published, what we're seeing here is that when you look at 1 week versus 4 days, you get a sense of how the wireless streaming can affect how frequently batteries need to be replaced. And so where patients might be able to go a week or more with their everyday use, heavy usage of the wireless streaming can reduce that to much less than a week. And then anecdotally, that's some of the same information we've heard from a number in the industry. Now, as we look at higher current drain, how do patients actually act on that? And so we had some different options here for the hearing professionals to respond to. And as you can see here, they really pretty much group into the same, the top three responses really all mean they're going to use more of the disposable batteries. They're going to carry the extras. They're going to buy bulk batteries. Less popular alternatives were reducing the wireless usage, changing to a different battery brand, and nobody was recommending to change to a rechargeable, and nobody was willing to return the accessory. So that was good. What it means is people are basically consuming more batteries. And from Oticon, we did get some information that in their assessment, frequent RF streaming users consume over twice as many batteries than the near-field magnetic induction wireless streaming. So this means that patients are spending more money. The battery life is probably a little bit more unpredictable because it may last 3 days, it may last 4 days, and so this is something that is affecting the patient's experience. Now, when we look at buying bulk batteries, what that means is now that patients are being more sensitive to the battery purchases, and maybe that's driving them to purchase batteries online or from other locations, and that may be drawing them away from the audiologist or dispenser's office, where in the past that may have been the source of where they purchased their replacement batteries. So what we're going to look at now are the recent advances in wireless accessories. Again, all of those responses on the surveys were based on wireless technologies that were available in early 2013. And there's certainly been a number of advances since that time period, and I think many of these advances address some of the shortcomings that we saw in the survey. So, for example, too complicated to use. Many of the new devices that are released are actually addressing that particular weakness. So one of the things that's obviously made a lot of news are the made-for-iPhone devices. This is just a list of what's available today off the Apple website, and the list of compatible devices that carry that made-for-iPhone label. Related to that is taking a lot of those wireless features and devices that I talked about earlier and integrating those into the smartphone. So, for example, the remote control is now an app in the smartphone. The remote microphone is now a feature built into the iPhone. So instead of having all these different devices, they've all been integrated into the smartphone, which is a very positive step, I think, for the patient. And then, as I alluded to, iPhone and Android apps. So again, building on the smartphone as the platform that the patient uses and developing apps to take care of the functions that were previously utilized by the unique devices developed by the manufacturers themselves. So if we take a few examples here, the smartphone is a device platform. Again, as I mentioned earlier, remote control, audio streaming, remote microphone, Bluetooth, all of that is all built into one device. And that means the patient doesn't need an extra device. It means they don't need to charge an extra device. All of those extra remote microphones and Bluetooth phone relay devices all have their own rechargeable battery that needs to be charged. And so that means it's more devices to manage and more devices to remember how to operate. The smartphone apps definitely help on the usability side. It's very user friendly, and it's also easy to update with new features. So as new capabilities come along, those can be pushed out to the users and automatically updated, which makes everything much more convenient for them. A little bit different take from one manufacturer in terms of trying to make wireless accessories easier to use is actually to move in the opposite direction of the wireless connectivity and actually move more towards wired connections. So again, instead of going from the hearing aids would wirelessly connect to a lanyard device, and that lanyard device then would plug into the smartphone, as an example. So instead of having to manage the Bluetooth connection between the lanyard device and the phone itself, a cable makes that a much simpler approach. And so again, we're just seeing different approaches by the manufacturers to address the complaint that the wireless accessories are complicated to use. Another improvement, I think, is that the smartphone itself can be used as a remote microphone for audio TV streaming. And so what that means is you don't need to find or make a cable connection between the device and the television. If the smartphone is located near the speaker of the TV, then the hearing aid can pick up that sound wirelessly, and it makes for a much simpler arrangement. And the audio TV streaming was judged to be one of the more beneficial wireless functions. So as we look at making these easier to use, it's worth talking about these new made for iPhone devices. And we've heard about Bluetooth, but what's new for the iPhone and hearing aids is the use of Bluetooth Smart. And they are actually two different wireless protocols that are utilized. And so when you look at your standard Bluetooth connection and you go to your iPhone, you're looking at a settings screen that takes you to Bluetooth, and you can see a whole listing of all the Bluetooth devices that are shown. What you won't see is your hearing aids because they don't use the standard Bluetooth connection. And what they actually use instead is what Apple has implemented, which is a triple-click home button, which takes you to a special screen for the Bluetooth Smart connection. And this is where you would see your hearing aid connections at this point, and allow you to set up and configure and do any of the connection pairing type work would be in this particular menu. So again, this would be something that would be different than the standard Bluetooth. The other area that we see that for Bluetooth, the setup is different, and you really need to follow the instructions to the letter from the manufacturer on setup. When I made my first attempt at setting up the hearing aids on the iPhone, I thought I would intuitively try to go through the process, and ultimately I was unsuccessful. And I had to ultimately go back and follow step by step the recommended procedure, and then I was able to connect to the hearing aids just fine. Also on the pairing side, it is, again, as with any Bluetooth connection, sometimes the pairing will become disconnected, in which case you may just have to open and close the battery door to reestablish that pairing, but you may also have to turn the Bluetooth connection off, which is generally easiest to do by airplane mode, or you can turn the Bluetooth off and then turn it back on, and that will then reestablish the pairing connection between the hearing aid and the iPhone. Looking at increasing the benefits, again, these are the new technologies, new offerings. A lot of new capabilities built into these apps. So things like finding your lost hearing aids based on the strength of that Bluetooth Smart signal. Providing geotagging programs, so saving programs, customizing programs based on very particular settings is another benefit that is being provided by these apps. Being able to stream in stereo and adjust some of the bass and treble in the sound level quality is also very beneficial. And lastly, there's some online manuals, how-to guides to enable the users to take advantage of all of the features and accessories to the fullest extent. What we haven't seen is a big improvement in battery life. And what we've seen is we've looked over the history of battery life in hearing aids. We go back to analog. As we made the transition from analog aids to digital, we saw a decrease in the battery life. And now as we go to our current offering with wireless, we see that battery life again is taking a hit. And so what this means, again, is patients are having to purchase more batteries. And what that means is they're spending more on the batteries. They do have to more frequently change batteries, which tends to be the more difficult process, especially for patients with poor dexterity. And the battery life becomes more unpredictable. So there's a greater chance of the battery running out in a time when it's very inconvenient or makes it very difficult to plan for. And this all affects exactly how the patient is satisfied with their overall hearing aid experience. So when we look at rechargeable batteries, which were not recommended in our earlier survey for wireless streaming, what we're looking at is what would be needed for a rechargeable battery to be successful in the hearing aid market. And the first area really has to do with hearing aid performance. So there can't be any sacrifice of any acoustic performance. We need to see as good a performance as is commonly seen in the disposable batteries today. We need to see at least 16 hours of runtime to be qualified as an all-day runtime. And we need to have predictable battery life so that when the patient puts the hearing aid on in the morning after charging overnight, they can be confident that the battery is going to last all day and not run out during the day. On the charging side, as we see the picture of Old Faithful here, it needs to be reliable, easy to use, and it needs to be able to charge overnight. And what we've seen in our field testing, what overnight means is it needs to be able to be recharged within 7 hours. What we've seen is that even for patients who wear the hearing aid for extended time periods, the average over a time period is about 7 hours of time with the hearing aids on the charger itself. Next, we do want the rechargeable battery should be interchangeable with the disposable zinc air. Of course, there's times when people forget to charge or they go on vacation, so you need to have the ability to be able to use either the rechargeable battery or zinc air depending on what the situation comes up. Affordable, of course, we know that. People are spending more on batteries, so they're becoming more sensitive to this. So this should give an opportunity for the rechargeable battery to be more economical than going through the disposable batteries. Lastly, environmental benefit. So by not throwing away these disposable batteries, we'd like to see less waste. And of course, that should be a benefit that should be promoted by the hearing professional as well. So what's interesting to note is that all the manufacturers do offer rechargeable batteries in their wireless accessories, but very few of the manufacturers offer rechargeable batteries in their hearing aids themselves. And so that's one of the things that ZPower is working on, is to help and assist manufacturers to make that transition. So let's look ahead to the future and what we might see coming down the road. I think, again, we've seen a lot of the announcements over the Made for iPhone. But there's a lot of other smartphones on the market besides just the iPhone. So what we are seeing is that there'll be expanded smartphone compatibility. So phones that run Android software, for example. So if you have a Samsung phone or an HTC or some other mobile phone manufacturer brand, your phone will be compatible with direct connection to the hearing aids here in the future as well. Killer apps. When you open up the hearing aid to a software development community, people can come up with all kinds of clever ideas. And so the new apps that come along may allow you to play some unique or interesting game, for example, in your hearing aid. And so that's something that would be very helpful and might also increase interest in the wireless accessories themselves. Better battery solutions. This goes back to the shorter battery life, and so we want to help the manufacturers come up with solutions that will improve the user's experience with their wireless streaming. And finally, communication standards. The manufacturers are getting together to try to come up with some standards for the hearing aid industry and enable devices to be more interchangeable so that everyone isn't dealing with their own proprietary protocol. And as we look to make advances in that particular area, that's really what we see for the future. So, as a recap and summary for our presentation today, what we found in our survey was the three most important factors for the adoption of wireless accessories are the patient benefit, how easy they are to use, and battery life. And as we look at each one of those on the patient benefit side, we learned that the Bluetooth phone offered the biggest benefit, and the remote microphone may be the most underutilized benefit based on what it's able to provide on the signal to noise ratio. So if it's a good fit for the patient, this may actually provide a significant benefit for them. On the ease of use, we're seeing more features incorporated into the smartphone so that the patient is not required to carry many different devices. And we're seeing the user interface and the features and capabilities significantly improving with the apps. And we'll see that continue to grow here as time goes on. On the battery side, what we've learned and what we know are that the radio frequency streaming consumes more batteries, and that's leading to rechargeable battery technologies gaining attention because this is an area that we can significantly improve the patient's experience in that particular area. So with that, I would like to acknowledge assistance that I've got from each one of the manufacturers and each one of the conferences that we attended and conducted our survey. And I also would like to thank you as the listener for participating in this particular presentation. If you have any questions about ZPower, please feel free to visit our website, www.zpowerbattery.com, and there are a number of different ways to learn more about our battery technology or to contact myself or our President and CEO, Dr. Ross Duber. So again, thank you for attending, and I look forward to any feedback that you may have. Thank you.